To the cloud, and we are recording.
Perfect. So welcome to the Grumpy Monkey Picture Book Study. So this isn't, this is designed to be a presentation, but there's a lot of discussion as well. So the topic focus today is how to include a lesson without preaching in your picture book. So be thinking about, I would appreciate if y'all think about lessons or things you've tried to include in your projects before, especially the ones where it didn't feel quite right, because we're going to talk about that at the end. Perfect. So the objective, I didn't change the title there. Sorry. The objective is to talk about how to include a lesson without preaching and then brainstorm elements into our work. The book is written by Suzanne Lang and illustrations are by Max. They're a wife-husband duo. They've written about, I think, 10 of the Grumpy Monkey books, and then they've written a couple of other books together. And then fun fact, she's also a television producer, so she's very busy. And then I wanted to do a live reading of the book. Just curious, how many people, was anyone able to read it, or do we have a few people who are kind of jumping in today?
Jumping in.
Okay, no worries. All right. One wonderful day, Jim Pansy woke to discover that nothing was right. The sun was too bright, the sky was too blue, and the bananas were too sweet. Jim was confused. What's going on? Maybe you're grumpy, suggested Norman from next door. I'm not grumpy, Jim insisted. On his walk, he met Marabou. Jim's grumpy, Norman told Marabou. Why are you grumpy, Jim? Asked Marabou. It's such a wonderful day. Grumpy? Me? I'm not grumpy, said Jim. But look at the way you're standing, Marabou said. It's true, said Norman. You're all hunch. So Jim loosened up. Then he ran into Lemur. Jim's grumpy, Norman told Lemur. Why are you grumpy, Jim? Asked Lemur. It's such a wonderful day. Grumpy? Me? I'm not grumpy, said Jim. Your eyebrows look grumpy, said Lemur. It's true, said Norman. They're all bunched up. So Jim raised his brow. Then he tripped over Snake. Oh no, said Norman. That's the last thing you need when you're feeling so grumpy. Grumpy? Me? I'm not grumpy, said Jim. Then why that frown, said Snake. I think it's because he tripped over you, Norman whispered to Snake. So Jim put on a smile. Finally, Jim looked happy, but he didn't feel happy inside. Everyone wanted Jim to enjoy this wonderful day. You should sing with us, said the birds, but Jim didn't feel like singing. You should swing with us, said the monkeys. Jim didn't feel like swinging. You should roll with us, said the zebras. Jim didn't feel like rolling. You should stroll with us, said the peacocks. Jim didn't feel like strolling. You should lie in the grass. You should stomp your feet. You should take a bath and make a splash. You should hug someone. You should laugh. You should take a nap. You should eat old meat or some honey. You should jump up and down. You should sit in the sun. You should dance. But Jim didn't feel like doing any of that. Why are you grumpy, Jim? Said the others. It's such a wonderful day. I'm not grumpy, shouted Jim as he beat his chest. And he stormed off. Jim felt sorry. A little sorry for shouting at everyone, but mostly sorry for himself. I guess I am grumpy, Jim sighed. And just as he was starting to really feel sad, he came upon Norman. Norman was slumped, his eyebrows were bunched up, and he was frowning. What's the matter? Are you grumpy? Asked Jim. No, I dance with porcupines, said Norman. Are you okay? Asked Jim. It hurts, but I'll probably feel better soon enough, said Norman. Are you still grumpy? Yes, said Jim, but I'll probably feel better soon enough. For now, I need to be grumpy. It's a wonderful day to be grumpy, said Norman. Jim agreed, and he already felt a little bit better. Cool. So, fun book. Released in 2018. I do something like, let's guess the specs of the book. What did we feel like target age range? Like, usually there's a range, but like if you had to pick, like, I think this would really appeal to, what age would you say? And there's really not a wrong answer here.
I think
Mhm.
5 is a
5.
great, yeah, because
Mhm.
that's when they're really starting to express those emotions
Mhm.
and they are having to deal with kids. Oh, good. Sue agrees with me. She says 5.
Yeah, and the publishers usually give a wider range.
4
You know,
to
it
8.
helps them, I think, sell more books.
Yeah,
But I think,
Sharon gave it a wider range with 4 to 6.
I say 4 to 8.
Oh,
I
okay.
could see there be 8-year-olds finding it funny, especially the porcupine. I feel like that joke a 5-year-old may not get. What about page count?
36.
Okay. And then word count, did it feel like on the longer side, like over under 500? Or right about?
We say 500, 550.
Okay. And then any ideas on the publisher? People use it. All right. Okay. So
Random House.
yeah, about 48. Oh, I didn't, page count's actually 32, but
Ooh.
there's a little extra in there. I'll get to explain that later. Word count's about 485, and it's a Random House children's book.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say 45?
480,
Oh,
485.
okay. There we go. I was all.
Yeah,
how did
I
they
do
that?
approximate because I count it by hand, and I'm like, let me give myself a little wiggle room in case I missed
Yeah,
a couple
yeah,
words.
yeah.
Awesome.
Sue
So-
was with me with 550, so we both missed out on our banana.
It felt a little bit longer, and I think we can kind of explain like how that happened, and how they made every word count for sure. I think
Mhm.
in the page count, so there's a part where it talks about all the things that are happening, and initially they start with do this, said the blank, do this, said the blank, and then eventually they took away the said the blank, and they're just saying what they're doing. And that made it feel longer without it being much longer. So that was kind of a trick to shorten it and have more animals without it taking up more pages. So this is what you would call a standalone book with series potential. So it started off as Grumpy Monkey and then was massively popular, New York Times bestselling. And then I saw somewhere on line 10, I just threw some up on here on the book. And why do you think they would find this book to be appealing? Because that's Random House is a pretty big children's book publisher. Why do you think they were like, yeah, we'll do this book?
Maybe because it's so rare for a book to give a child permission to just feel their feels.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I also think they like when there's a husband wife like illustrator writer combo. I know a lot of times they usually like to pick the illustrator, but there might be something to that they found appealing, and they had already published a couple of books together.
Yeah, I was going to say, because normally they don't want you to already have your illustrator, but when it's your spouse, that somehow that makes it okay.
Mhm.
You're almost like the same person to them.
And
And they love a illustrator writer combo. So if it's spouses or that one person practically, it's the same thing. Illustrator author combo.
It's like a 2-for-1 special.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any
Blair
illustrators?
says maybe it's possible that they liked it because it was a character that boys could relate to. I guess with all the tutu characters they've got out there,
Mm-hmm.
this
that's
was
good.
the complete opposite.
Boys, but I don't think it's so necessarily boyish that girls wouldn't be like
Right.
whatever, about it, which
Yeah.
is nice. It's appeals to boys, but girls wouldn't mind it. Do we have any illustrators here today? Or author illustrators? Okay. We'll get one to show up eventually. I'll go through this pretty quickly in case we have someone watching back the recording. So there's only 3 full spreads. Full spread is where the illustration takes up both pages. There's like a background. And I asked like, why so few? And in this one, I'm like, why not? Like it wasn't really, I think, in this series, like necessary, it's the jungle. It's pretty much in the same place. And there was a lot of things happening. There were a lot of different characters. And I think if they had done more full spreads, it would have been like visually overwhelming. And so I think they kind of limited it to what the minimum that they could do to be able to have more animals in the story. There's a lot of spot illustrations. That's where it's like just there. The why to me is because they had that whole action sequence where the different animals were doing the different things, and they were able to fit in a lot more animals by keeping the phrasing a little bit shorter on the back half of it or the front half, and then keeping the illustrations pretty tight.
Yeah, I think almost they needed a lot of spot illustrations rather than full
Mhm.
full sheet spreads, because the scenes kept changing. Like it was a lot of scenes.
Mm-hmm. And they were able to kind of manage all of this in that the 32 actually print pages because of the balance of the backgrounds versus the spot illustrations, leaning toward more spot illustrations. And then pretty typical, there's 2 pages that are reserved for copyright, title page, and dedication. That is on a full spread. I had that like before I started reading. Sometimes they have those split up. But when you do that, you can start the story on a full spread itself, which is often good for setting up like the setting, the world with a good like illustration so that you can get a feel of the world just initially. So lots of white space. I was surprised by, you know, even on the spot illustrations, there weren't always a lot of background. Have y'all ever heard, oh, publishers don't want animal characters anymore? This book was only from 2018, so it's still relatively new. I think that even if they had tried to publish this now, I think it would have been fine. So, you know, don't let yourself be too limited by, oh, publishers don't want this, publishers don't want that. I think if it's an idea that really works,
Yeah.
unless that publisher has a lot of books that are about to come out that cover that topic, I think if it's really, there's something appealing or really good about it, you shouldn't shy away from an idea you're passionate about. Annie, have you heard people say that about picture books?
Yes, I have, and it breaks my heart because I feel like I think they're forgetting what the kids want when they're looking to grow, and children still feel safer relating to animals when having a conversation. And it breaks my heart that they're taking that away from children. So let's not stop.
Yeah, it might be that they receive a lot of like queries from new, you know,
Mhm.
stories or new, you know, authors or new like maybe that's it, but I still think there's space for it. I think it just has to be at a very high level. There is a color as a background. Hold
I
on.
was told that on SEL books, social emotional learning books, they
Mhm.
want the real life characters so that children could relate to them rather than animals.
Well, this one,
Mhm.
it is
That's
a
what they tell me, you know.
Yeah. That makes sense on some levels, but at the same time, if a child can have that space of distance, I feel like they can accept it in a safer way.
Mhm.
And children like animals.
Mhm.
They love
Mhm.
animals
Yeah.
rather
Right.
than real people.
Yeah.
But I that's what I like to write is social emotional learning, and then that's what I've been told. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. They're saying, oh no, we're looking for real people, change your character. So I'm just telling you that's what my last, what was it? I was at a writers conference, and that's what
Mhm.
trying to get somebody, that's what they were telling me.
Mhm.
I was
No, we
rejected
agree.
because
That's
of that.
word on the street right now. We just disagree with the word.
Yeah.
I'm saying it might be a hard pitch, but I still think if they had tried to publish this now, it would have been picked up because it's done so
Yeah.
well. And
Mhm.
him being an animal, maybe I think what it is if you make an animal character and the only thing that makes them an animal is the way you drew them, that doesn't work. In this, he's literally an animal. They're rolling around, they're doing animal things. So maybe they don't like animal characters that might as well be a human. Does that make sense?
Maybe. Marcella?
Oh, I was just thinking that's actually one of the things I liked about it and noticed that there's sort of an economy of expression there. When you show all the different animals giving their suggestion, you don't have to say this one likes this, and you know, it's in their nature. All the things all the animals are suggesting are things that are just, you know, already encoded in what you think that they would, you know, like to do. Whereas if you were doing the same thing with kids, it's like you'd have to somehow represent their background story. You know, and there's limits to that. There's, you know, problems with stereotyping and that sort of thing if you're doing that, you know, an actual person.
So then by using animals, it also helped them economize their words.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to finish this slide real quick. So I mentioned color as a background. When he's grumpy, the whole background is just red. And they actually carry that through the cover. And then there's a little bit of passage of time. It's mainly in the last part of the book whenever his friend Norman comes up. It's very subtle. It's a little more orangey, like sunsetty. And then if on the earlier side where I had the series, it's very repetitive in the cover design. But for a series like this, it makes sense because if the child really loves this book, they'll go up to the purple one, knowing it's different because of the color, but it's also still very much, you know, the same grumpy with a little element on it. And I thought that was interesting because they may, you would think they're like, oh, that's the same, but in this case, repetition I think can be helpful. All right, so page count, it is 32 pages. It feels longer. If you look at the book, the physical copy, they actually, there's red pages that are glued down to the actual book. Those are called, well, do we know what those are for? Like, do y'all understand what I'm talking about? Like when you open a book and there's just solid paper and then you turn and then the normal pages with the print are there?
Or like the end pages?
Yeah. What are those for?
To get a better grip on the book when you carry it without the
So
cover?
Autographs.
if you don't
Ooh.
use end pages, you have to glue down those print pages and you have less pages to work with.
Mm.
So the end pages will allow you to have the full 32 pages, to have the illustrations, the dedication and everything, and then you can use the end pages to attach itself. So that's how you kind of stretch it out. There are some books where those pages are actually part of the book itself, and that's called a self-ended book. So the why is that way you have more pages to work with. And when you have a book that has this length, you know, almost 500 words, you probably want every page you can. That's probably something that is discussed like with the editor and the publisher, which way they want to go. All right, so something I wanted to think about, because it's tricky to say how to write a story and tell a lesson that doesn't feel preachy. So I think it's important to remember like what being a kid is like. Does anyone remember when you're a kid and there's just some adult in your life and they're always trying to teach you a lesson and you're just like, oh my gosh, just leave me alone. Like, just let me live my life. I don't know if y'all ever had that experience, or when adults would try to teach you things by telling you, it was harder to receive that. Did anyone else kind of have that
About
experience?
to share a story that requires therapy for us, but maybe we should not. But yes, I did, but mine was more physical.
Oh no. Okay, I'm not necessarily
No, not a
referring-
beating physical. Just like
Oh.
my mom liked to create an illustration of,
Oh.
no. Yes, I do remember.
Okay, so we remember that. So
Mhm.
we want to keep that in mind when we're thinking about how to incorporate a lesson into the book. So keeping that in mind, in the role of a book, what is our role as a children's book writer? What are we actually doing? Are we teaching a lesson, or are we just creating a world and a story to tell a story?
I always thought we were there to entertain,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like that's not why we end up getting published. I don't know.
So I think it's personally to tell a story, and if there's an opportunity for learning, isn't that up to either the child to make that connection with the clues given, or if they don't get it, I think for the person reading it with them or the teacher to ensure the lesson's been made.
Mhm.
Because if you're so heavy-handed with it, I think it's less fun for the child. So
Yeah.
I believe of course, we want them to, if they can learn something from it, great. And we can go in with the intention for the child to learn, but I don't think doing that in a really heavy-handed way is appealing to the child, because then they feel like that kid on that right on the slide, like where it's like, I'm teaching you a lesson in this book. It's not a textbook, right? So are we writing textbooks or stories?
This conversation makes me think of George Orwell when he
Mhm.
said, when I am about to write a book, I don't say to myself, I'm going to produce a work of art. I write it because there is some lie that I want to expose, some fact to which I want to draw attention, and my initial concern is to have a hearing. Now,
Mhm.
I think in this way, he's kind of saying on both sides, yes, I want to teach you something, but the only way I can reach your ears, the only way I can get this hearing is to entertain you. So, and also when we expose something like here, he was exposing that you are allowed to be yourself. He didn't say you got to do this. You're
Mhm.
right. He let the child figure it out, but he simply exposed it. He simply made it visible.
The way I kind of think about it too is you shouldn't have to say what the moral of your story is in your picture book. If you haven't shown it with the illustrations and with the actions that are happening, then outright saying it, number one, if you have to say it, then you need to go back and figure out how you're presenting it. Number two, if you presented it well, you're cheapening the story.
Yeah.
Because if you need to, and then if you presented it rather effectively, but you're afraid the child's not going to get it, then we just have to trust that the parent or the guardian or the teacher can kind of help step in. We don't have to overdo it, you know, for fear of them not getting it.
You know, actually, it's funny how I always say I don't write picture books. Like I'm here as the
Mhm.
regional advisor, just to support this wonderful, wonderful event. But I don't do picture books. But at the same time, I kind of do. Like it's my dirty secret that on the side I do attempt picture books.
Mhm.
And there was this one I did. And I think this just somehow just snapped in what is wrong with, because I love it. There's so many great passages in this book. I'm rhyming, it's funny. But
Mhm.
I get to the end and what do? I summarize the whole moral. I did
Okay.
that. And I'm like, I didn't even realize I had done that until this very conversation. I spelled it out. I summarized it. Like, oh wow. Okay.
It cheapens it, and it's almost like, okay, here's a different example. If you have to explain the joke, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah.
Like if someone laughs and then you explain why the joke was funny, they're gonna stop laughing and be like, okay.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing.
Mhm.
If you're kind of stealing the child's thunder. Okay. So I was thinking about this is a disappointing aha moment. So have you ever read a story like in a like a chapter book or adult YA, whatever, adult fiction, where there's a really obvious twist and you clock it immediately? And then they act like in the story it's this big thing and you almost feel like your intelligence is insulted.
Mhm.
Like, oh, there's a missing princess and the story starts with an orphan. And you're like, okay, all right. Like it's gonna be surprised like that, and you figure it out like pretty much page one. And then everyone is so surprised that she was the princess. And it's like, yeah, okay. I think that we can kind of do something similar, and that doesn't feel good. If there's a twist in a story for adults, there need to be clues, but you have to work hard to get there to figure it out. We don't want to do that to the child that's reading our book. We don't want them to figure it out and then us to spell it out.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I already knew that. And it's a waste of your precious like word count as well.
And you know, it makes me wonder also if you have to spell it out, then perhaps they weren't ready for that lesson. Otherwise, they would have picked up what you set down.
It's okay if they're not ready. If they're not
Right,
ready,
no, I know.
there's
That
a
that
good
means
chance
let them
it's
just
going to
be
be a parent.
entertained. Yeah.
Mhm.
When they're
There's
old
a-
enough or when they're mentally ready for it, then they'll come
Mhm.
back to it. Yeah.
Because if they're little, we're presuming the parents reading to them anyway.
Yeah.
And they can help make sure, or a teacher can make sure, ask questions about the story to make sure it really sunk in. So there's probably more than one lesson in this book. What would you say some of the lessons, and if there's multiple lessons in a book and you spell it out, it also cheapens like the other opportunities or other lessons they could have taken away from it, I would say as well.
Mhm.
And they're not going to want to read it again. Because if you can find different things to learn each time, you're going to go in looking for more aha moments. But if you spell out the answer, they're not going to go back with repeat readings looking for something new because you've cut that off.
Right. So now your question about what other lessons did we pick up there? I had some thoughts on that, but I want to wait until last because I feel like I'm kind of hogging the space. So if anybody else had any thoughts on that. Now, Sharon says it's okay to be grumpy sometimes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
The way I was hearing it first, or the direction I thought it was going was, and probably this is because this is my own experience bringing to the table, but I thought it was presenting ideas for things you can do when you want to get yourself out of the bad mood,
Mhm.
right? Everybody had a recommendation of something he could try.
That's good. I thought that too, that the kid might take away, well, hold on, maybe it would feel good to roll around if I'm grumpy. Maybe it would feel good to move my body if I'm grumpy. What if he had tried that? Absolutely. What about Norman? Could the child pick up anything from how his gorilla friend approached him and talked to him, especially at the ending about him being grumpy?
I had a word on Norman. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put in now. Okay, so let's start with Norman. I felt like you guys are saying where you feel like the story was going. I felt like the story was going to be about how Norman is creating this emotion for Jim. Like Jim's just running his own business, and Norman's all, you're grumpy, and telling her, I'm telling you what, he could have been having a great day, but somebody does that over and over. You're like, yeah, now I am, thanks. So I almost felt like, yeah, I felt like that was where we were going a little bit. But what I also picked up as a backup lesson here is with everybody sharing their idea of what he could do, it to me was the point was that everybody has their own way of finding their happiness. Like there's so many ways, so many different things you could try, and everybody had their own.
Absolutely. So imagine if at the end of this book, the author had laid out what the lesson was. It's okay to be grumpy sometimes. And it's okay if you're grumpy too, little kid. Well, then the parent might ask, how would you feel if you were grumpy and your friend kept going around telling everyone you're grumpy? Do you think it was fair of Norman to do that? There's other things that could be taken away. And when you, like, if I wouldn't probably, if I were reading this book to a kid and it ended that way, I probably wouldn't have follow-up questions. I'd be like, okay, well, we're done now. I'd just be like, it was good right until the end. All right, let me go to the next slide. Yeah. And I would say from this, the biggest takeaway is probably it's okay to be grumpy. But the way it's presented, I don't feel like it's presented as, and the moral of the story is, I feel like it was presented pretty naturally. Okay, so why does the book work just generally? Because it was a New York Times bestseller. You see here on Amazon, there's over 25,000 ratings. So presumably they've sold a lot more copies, even just through Amazon. Why do we think it's popular?
I think it's the artwork. That monkey is just too cute.
I agree. The cover, whenever I bought this secondhand in Houston, and when I saw the cover, I thought it was pretty compelling. And I'm like, I want to see what's inside. And they do. They have a series of books, like, and and a lot of the series are on the New York Times bestseller list. So not only is this one popular, the follow-up books are also popular. They also sell little dolls of it, which might help with the popularity. I thought it was interesting how there's no twist to this. Like, going in that he's a grumpy guy, not just by the title, but by his face. So that the child has an expectation of what the content is going to be. And then it's kind of enjoyable. Maybe you want to see him being grumpy. What's he going to do when he's grumpy? And I think it also works, and children will come back to it, because one of the best parts of humor for a child is when they know something the main character doesn't know. That is like comedic gold. Like, he's saying he's not grumpy, and the kid's like, oh, of course he's grumpy. He's doing this. You are grumpy. And they'll talk to the book and they'll interact with it because it's hilarious. And the payoff of him realizing he's grumpy, I thought it was pretty poignant too. And the way it was handled at the end will make it popular with parents, because they can turn this into a lesson and they can preach with it, like, are you feeling like Grumpy Monkey? They're like, yeah. And then the kid might say, okay, I guess it's okay. I'm gonna go be grumpy for a little while. It can be really like put into the child's life.
I want to go ahead and add some of the comments that we have in the chat
Sure.
box here. When you were asking, I think this is in correlation. I didn't catch it right away, so I don't know if it matches the timeline. When you're saying, what do we think made it such an amazing popular book? Maria suggests it's because they have a series. And so they've already built their audience. I feel like that's what helped them sell the other books, but
definitely
this one had to be popular first. Boy, I want that series. Sue says, though, perhaps Curious George already being popular, this was a great, like a comp title for it.
Oh, Curious George, Grumpy Monkey. I didn't catch that, so that's clever. That's a good point. And it could be funny for the family to say, okay, we're gonna read about George. George is being good. Let's see what Grumpy Monkey's doing. And like kind of alternate, and that could be fun even for a teacher.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the flip sides of that monkey coin.
Absolutely. Okay. I started this with the last study where we do like, let's ruin it. Okay, so this is after he's just yelled, and I mean, the elephant's looking troubled. It says, and he stormed off. So I wanted to make it, now we're going to preach. Everyone could tell Jim was grumpy. He refused to play all day. He made grumpy expressions. He even yelled at everyone. He should have listened to Norman from the beginning. It's preaching. But all of those things the child would be picking up from the story. There's not a need to summarize what's happening here. And
what ruined it the absolute most was he should have listened to Norman from the beginning. I think at that point, every child is taking that book and chucking it through the window.
Yeah, because they wanted to see him grumpy.
And they also don't want to be told what they were supposed to have been doing, because they get told that all day long.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And then I did one more example on this, but Jim didn't feel like, okay, I'm not grumpy. Shout out Jim as he beat his chest. And he was grumpy. It's okay to be grumpy, but yelling is bad when your friends just want to play. It just cheapens it.
Yeah.
Does ruining it help? Do y'all kind of see what, like, does that make a little more sense? Okay. Good. I presume that these people would never write like that, but it's just, you don't want to say, because that's show don't tell, and it's like probably the worst way to do it, I think. I mean, anyway. All right. So, but it's okay to give hints, right? You just want to make the text and the images like you need to give enough information. So, like, because he says, are you okay? It hurts, but I'll probably feel better. Are you still grumpy? Yes. But I'll probably feel better soon enough too. For now, I need to be grumpy. It's okay that they said that, because it shows that he accepted what was happening and recognized that he did need to be grumpy a little bit longer. So it's not saying that you can't give any information. It's just you want to do it in a way that if the illustrator can't show it with the illustrations, especially, because you didn't quite see in the illustration that he had accepted like his grumpiness. He was figuring out he was grumpy, and then at this point he's like, yeah, I need to be grumpy. Yeah, and he already felt a little better. Well, this is one of the times it's okay to tell. We can see he feels better, but it's also nice to say it. He already felt a little better. So this isn't preaching, but it does fit in really well with the lesson, because it can be like, hey, child, you were, let's talk about it, and maybe you'll feel a little bit better, like Jim.
You know what? In my mind, as I read that, I'm trying to figure out, how do you know if you are preaching or simply stating it? I'm going back to your let's ruin it statement. As soon as I read that Norman comment, I felt almost trapped in my soul. It gave me a very negative vibe. You know what I mean? It made me feel unsafe. Whereas when I read this, it's such a mood lifter. And maybe that's how you determine if you've crossed that line, is when you say it, does it lift up your soul a little bit? And
right.
That's kind of hard really to determine, but I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm wondering. How do you really figure out when you've crossed that line?
You ask why you're saying it. If you're saying it so the child's gonna for sure understand, okay, no. Or if you're saying it to summarize, no. Here, they're saying it because it's a nice ending, it feels good.
Mhm.
And that's a good reason to do it.
Have to have an ending.
Okay, so I tried to make a scenario, and I don't know if this is gonna work because I didn't want to draw something. I could have, but I didn't want to spend all that time. So I wanted to set up a scenario and then we can try to write a little bit something. So I thought of a scenario where a little girl's been scared of thunder and the book is about her getting over the fear of thunder. And so I wrote a bad thing. Remember all the tools I taught you to stop being afraid of the lightning? What's wrong with this? The mom's talking.
Right. Well, I think first of all, it's not allowing the child to feel their feeling, because Grumpy Monkey just taught me that I'm allowed to feel my feelings, and this just tells me I'm not. So that right there strikes me, but I don't think that's quite the lesson you're going for here.
You don't want the parent to be teaching the lesson,
Right.
right? You want the character to figure it out and the child to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to present it where the maybe mom is there to introduce some of the tools earlier in the book, but I don't think the mom needs to be there at all later
Yeah,
on.
actually, Maria's agreeing with you with that. And she's saying the adult is trying to solve the problem, and so there's the problem right there. And yeah, I get that. And then Blair says it's also talking down to her in a very negative way.
Yeah.
And you know what, can I just say, if you guys feel comfortable unmuting, this is definitely the discussion part. I don't, let's hear your pretty voices. Because mine croaks a lot and I misspeak a lot. So it's best if we do hear your voice.
Absolutely. So I wrote this to intentionally be bad, and that's kind of what I was going for. So I'm using Canva images, so the girl's gonna look very different. So we could change the panel to where it's just the child. Child is scared of the storm or something. And what I said, and I can have you all do something different. I'm so afraid I can't remember what to do. It had 3 steps. So she's thinking. So you could present it where the character doesn't quite remember or doesn't know what to do. You could present it where the child is like, oh, you do this. So that's one option. Does anyone have an option on how you could fix the ending of what might be this story?
Well, just to back up for a second to make sure I understand what you're saying there. So when Maria said the problem with the last one is that it was the adult fixing the problem, are you saying, so what you do on the flip side is you have the child fix the problem? Is that what we're talking about here?
So now it's just the child. And what could we have the child say or the book say to help the reader come to the conclusion of what to do without spelling it out with the words on the page? That's kind of a tricky exercise. I wanted to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's super tricky, especially because there's the whole story before here where we don't know what had led up to it.
So I gave an option. One option is to have the child not remembering.
Right. And
then that gives the reader, the child that's reading the story, a chance to call it out, because they will. They'll call things out in the story. The other option is for her to have a little flashback, or for her, if she has breathing exercises she's doing, she just starts them. The biggest thing is don't give, I think just don't lay out the answer with the summary.
Maybe her mom gave her something physical to do or hold when she's scared. So maybe she goes and finds that thing and then starts talking to herself about the steps she was supposed to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you have different options. The biggest one is don't just summarize because you don't know what to do, because it might take rewrites or something earlier in the book to have a clearer path to that. But that was a good suggestion.
She could have a phrase or a song, a rhyme with it or something. Or even so characterize it as something else. Like I think I'm trying to remember a book where they thought it was like bowling, they
Oh,
the
she
thunder-
imagines the thunder is bowling.
Pretend this
yeah,
out as something
it's
else, yeah.
it was something else, simile to something else, and so I'm trying to remember what book that was, but it was like, oh, there it goes again.
Oh, that's excellent.
yeah.
Right. And so the biggest takeaway here is don't just have mom give the answer, because it's not going to feel good, because the child that's reading the book already deals with adults giving the answers all the time.
So Sue seems to be a fan of the she tries and fails 3 times method.
Mm,
And actually, as I think about that, yeah, I can see her trying and failing and trying and failing until she stumbles upon the thing that's going to work for her.
right. And as that's happening, especially if you can set it up to where the reader figures it out before she does, that will be highly successful. Because you really, if you can help them feel like smart, because they are smart and they do know things and they're, intuitive and intelligent. We don't want to talk at them if we can, if we can help it. All right. And then we're getting to the more like reflection. I think I kind of went through this earlier, but what would y'all say like the stealing the thunder is as a writer? What does that look like?
Telling them what just happened or telling them what's going to happen.
Exactly.
So that they can't figure it out on their own.
Mm-hmm. And then does anyone have example of a lesson like that you was your goal to have a lesson in your story, and how you either were able to present it in a gentle way or where you had challenges doing that?
Can I say something first?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as a school counselor, that's my background. So I like to write stories that
Mhm.
teach, that's my
Mhm.
goal. When you
Mhm.
said why write, well, my goal is to help social emotional learning. And
Mhm.
many of the books, like I have this one on, you can see it, but the Grouchies, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of books by Julia Cook, and she
Mhm.
uses, but they go right away. Like for this one says, grouch and grump at everyone you meet throughout the day. Don't be nice to anyone, and you'll get your way. And as he goes on being grouchy, it kind of does, it goes through where he's saying that all the time, and the grouchies overcome him. And then after dinner, Dad asks me what's wrong and says, grouch and grump at everyone you meet throughout the day. Don't be nice at anyone, and you'll get your way. So he's kind of like telling them, I don't know, and there's other books like The Volcano, and
Mhm.
they do have the moral right there, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But I
Mhm.
know that the child comes to it, and of course he solves the problem,
Mhm.
but it is at your face. That's a lesson.
You can
The tattle tongue, all these books
yeah.
that they give you
Are
right
these
there, so
bestsellers or just books that the material that the schools use as an easy way to teach?
yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, they're not
Yes.
best. Well, this was very popular back in the day, like Tattletale Tongue, Spaghetti Hair. And these are all teaching courage, but they have the moral. So I
Mhm.
guess I was a little, kind of going that inclining that way until I'm hearing this. It's
'Cause
like the
I
moral's
would
there.
dig into it and figure out why it works.
Okay.
Because
If
we
it works.
kind of started this by saying, okay, well, they say no animal characters, but like this could have been published now and it would have worked. So there's always exceptions to the rule. I would say if it's maybe if there's gross humor, maybe they're really pulled in by something else other than the lesson. Maybe there's something highly appealing that they'll put up with the lesson at the end. So there may be a big draw to it. There may be something that the kid comes to it for this, but the parents like, aha, there's a lesson. But I think it would be difficult if it's, maybe I would dig
Well,
and see, and if you can feel free, if you want to, we can email about it. I can read it, and then, we can talk about it like offline and try to figure
yeah.
out why. Because if
Okay,
it's
so let
that
me,
popular, they're not feeling preached at.
yeah. And it's just tools to use, like in a counseling environment, or when you
I'm
want to
fine
teach a
with that.
lesson and things that these books are very good,
Oh, no, lessons are fine. It's
Yeah.
how you don't, it's being too heavy-handed with the lesson. There's a book
Okay.
called Allie All Along, where she has different colors and monsters and she keeps taking off the layers,
Yes.
trying different exercises.
Yes,
And
I-
then at the end, she's been Allie all along. Well, that's obviously teaching a lot of coping mechanisms for
Yes,
children.
yes.
It's including it in, but it's not too preachy, and there's things that are, it's a balance. And I'm not saying don't do social emotional. Those are huge. Like that's extremely popular right now, and you can even self-publish and make lots of money doing that. There's How to Train Your Angry Dragon. There's a series on Amazon. This guy's made probably hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this. I mean, I would not be like a couple 100,000 at least. And the artwork's not even that great. But it's really appealed to school counselors. So there's definitely a market there, but it has to be something that is appealing to the child.
I'm gonna steal, well, we can talk later. It's okay.
No, we still have discussion time now. Like we can, but I'm saying for me to read that book, I can read it and try to like
Yeah.
help you identify what the appeal is and why children keep coming back to it.
Originally, I wrote a book. I mean, I
Mhm.
was writing a series because my idea was what I used in counseling was like animal crackers, and each animal represented a behavior of a misbehavior, like
Mhm.
well, the first one was, of course, I had my giraffe, and he's the perfectionist because he's long, thin, and he's perfect. Goes on. Well, I changed my giraffe into a person now because I thought it was a cute story. They didn't want an animal, so now he's Timothy rather than Everett, So, anyways, I've written this story like so many times, trying to get it correct, like that, like what you said, because first, okay, well, I took away the animal, I made it a child. Then it's still a rhyme, fixed the rhyme, but what happens is that he is frustrated with his with making mistakes.
Mhm.
So as he makes a mistake, and I'll tell you real quick, it says, "Oh no," he would cry as he crumbled his paper, then down went his head, and he grunted at his neighbor because his tea was not straight. Miss Baker saw Timothy so troubled, so she calls the kids, anyways, and she starts using inventions. Did you know chocolate chips, were an invention? So it's kind of teaching a lesson, but then he doesn't understand it. So at the end, Timothy thought it was quite absurd. How can you learn from a mistake? Anyways, so the painting turns into where he learns his lesson. The watercolors collide and make a beautiful rainbow. And wow, mistakes are okay. So at the end, Lara is beautiful. Then I took some beta readers, and then I showed it to my daughter who has 5 kids. Anyways, she said, it'd be really cute. Now, this is what I'm going to ask you is, have you heard of, what is his name? It used to be Mr. Rogers, but now it's Tiger,
Oh yes, Daniel Tiger.
Daniel Tiger. And they always do a little song to the thing. And then it's a really cute, catchy song. She goes, if you really want to reach your kids, put a little song. So I did. I put a little song to it. And I think, all throughout when one of the children make a mistake, it says mistakes can happen and that's okay. We learn from them and we make our way. And then when he does it at the end, he does the same thing. It's a little song and ta-da, life is beautiful.
Mhm.
Is that preachy if you do a song? That's a good question, right?
What is the appeal of this story to children other than learning? Like the child is not going to enter into wanting to read a book to learn a lesson. I don't
Yeah.
think they go into it wanting to do social emotional learning. What is going to bring the child in? Is it funny? Do you have
Yeah.
gross humor? Do you have like what is going to lead them to the book?
Okay, that's a good
Because
question.
I don't think yes, children love music, but the parent reading the book's not going to know the song. It's going to be a rhyme. So at that point, you've written a poem.
That's good.
Right. And so is it a rhyming book or is it what is, because music's not going to pull them in because they can't hear it. Even if you put music notes around it, they won't know what's it sounds like. But they're so Grumpy Monkey, the appeal is he's
Funny,
grumpy
yeah.
and it's funny. And he doesn't know that he's grumpy, but but clearly he's grumpy. Like, that's hilarious. Like, oh, and then that guy sat on a porcupine. That's great. There's humor pulling them in.
I did want to say though, even though it's not a song because it's not something they've already heard, so they don't know the tune, it is perfectly okay to put verse in with prose. So you
Right.
can have the straight up story and then a little versey and a little sing-songy, and even though as long as the meter's good, they're not going to hear it the same way you do, but it's still going to be a song of sorts. I mean, it's still not bad. It's just a matter of, I think back to the original question, are we flat out telling them how to feel?
Yeah.
And I think
I think,
sorry.
I just had a couple of thoughts, but go ahead, Laura.
I just had an idea, because when she was saying like, or you're kind of telling them what to think or do. Also in the book, it sounded like the teacher, they're like sitting in a classroom and the teacher was telling them the lessons. And to the point of like, what's going to make them want to read it if they're just sitting here reading it, like the teacher is reading them a book, and in the book, a teacher is also telling a lesson. But I wondered, when you were saying like, we can find our way, I wonder if you put them in, like, the kids are going on an adventure and maybe they're like kind of lost in the woods or something, right? And they've, give them a place to go with it, where they're learning the lesson in a setting rather than just in a classroom, where then, it's like the teacher's telling the story and now you're a counselor in the school reading a story to them.
Right. And if you want to make it about art, that's totally fine. He doesn't have to be doing art in an art classroom. He could be at home making art and really frustrated that the art's not turning out like just the way he wants. And maybe his friend sees the art and talks about how beautiful it is, and maybe they're seeing something different in the art, and maybe they turn it upside down and it was there all along. And
Yeah.
sometimes you got to look at things from a different way I didn't want to discourage you about the song. I think now that I had a little more time to think about it, my concern with the song is how many times are you repeating it? And is the story now about that song, or is the story about, I feel like you could lose the story in that if it's repeating, and how long is it going to be? But I think you could write in a separate book and have in verse with that song in there. I just think it's going to overpower this story that you've told with the perfectionist. I would separate them.
Now, Marcella had some thoughts.
Oh, I was just thinking, I think somebody brought up that question of whether it was like the setting. There are kind of books that are used in the school setting, like for the counselor, and in that setting versus talking right out about how somebody's feeling, reading a story about those emotions. And here's the it's like you are on task, you're learning about social emotional stuff in a counselor setting. And that's different than you're pulling a book off the library shelf or you just want a good story. So Grumpy Monkey, somebody might just really like whether they feel grumpy or not. They don't have to be dealing with that emotion. And that might be kind of a way of looking at the story to see, like, does this float even if you have something else that you're talking about? I was thinking like bereavement books would be similar. So, there may be lessons that you want to teach about bereavement, but, you're going to be really subtle about that. And some of that's just going to be presence and that kind of thing. Which also is the thing I was thinking about at the end of Grumpy Monkey, where he's just sitting there together, and kind of the magic on the end, even though it's like he got a little bit better. He didn't get like rambunctious, like now he's having a party better. And sometimes I think some of the books that are used to teach things will have such a, abrupt change. The ending on the Grumpy Monkey reminded me a little bit of, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a book with a bunny. It's like the two characters, one's really upset. Would
it be the Elephant Piggy series? No, it wouldn't be. Never mind. Sorry.
And basically the end of it is just that, the friend just sits with them and they write it out, And I think for Grumpy Monkey that a little bit of, like if you get to the point, like you were saying, ruining, where you're trying to tell people it's okay to feel grumpy. Well, sometimes that's not a kid's question. Their question isn't, is it okay to feel this way? It's like what to do with it. And the things that people are suggesting aren't working. And then there's like this little bit of hope at the end, you'll get better.
I would say if you're wanting to
For
write
Maria,
I think
Another
what you
one.
really hit the nail on the head, and that's what I need to
Mhm.
have the shift, is that I was so used to reading books to learn from them
Mhm.
and to use them and to give a lesson. And I need to change that shift to is, why would the child read it
Mhm.
himself? Not why the teacher would pick it, not why the counselor would get it, but why would the child want to read it?
Yeah, I really loved Marcella's point of how even a child who's not experiencing grumpy would still love that story. And yeah, because I don't have to be grumpy to really love what he's gone through, because it is kind of funny and entertaining. So yeah, that's a good way to give yourself the, what do you call, litmus test there. Oh, there was another point about that, but oh,
I had-
I was gonna say, I noticed when we did the little example with the thunderstorm, right?
Mhm.
I noticed some of the way it was dealt with felt to me very 1930-ish. Like
Mhm.
how we would write a story back then is very different. Every
Mhm.
decade we get better at being not only more real about a situation, but less preachy about it. But back then, and a lot of the school materials nowadays still kind of have that same mentality where it's very, very it has a different way of preaching. It's not with the goal of entertaining. It's with the goal of pointing a finger.
Hold on. I had something I thought about.
Oh, and Sue wants to know, Marcella, are you talking about the rabbit listened?
probably, that sounds about right.
Does that sound right? Okay.
But yeah, because I remember thinking it was a rabbit, and I was trying to look it up.
But the whole
The other thing-
storyline sounds very elephant and piggy to me.
So Maria, do you write middle grade, or are you mostly focused on the younger kids?
Just the younger children, the
Okay.
4 to
Is
8.
there, there's a writer, Amber McBride, who's written some things, and a lot of it's like verse in novels in verse, which get at like the emotion of it, so you're telling it through like the person's experiences. And one in particular she had, we're also good at smiling, is so once again, it's the older kids, but it's not like younger kids don't deal with these things. She has a character that's actually been into hospitalized multiple times for her depression, but she talks about things that the counselor taught her. And I noticed in that it was interesting because she could use it. And you kind of hinted at that a little bit with the Michelle, when you were doing there were 3 things. I don't remember what they were. In this one, I remember she would talk about the breathing, but it wasn't like the breathing took care of all of her problems and gee, the counselor taught her this and now she carries on. It was just like one layer of it. And maybe the books, thinking of it as it just being one piece as opposed to this total answer might help us like get out of the preaching kind of part of it.
Right. I think too, if you're trying to do social emotional like lessons, if it's a textbook, everything is going to be there and there's not really room for discussion. Everything is just there. But if the goal is to write a story that a child would enjoy and figure out what the appeal of the story is, and then it is a launch pad for discussion for the counselor, you want to leave room for the counselor to ask questions and to facilitate a discussion. But if you've gone ahead and just said what it is, the child's not going to want to talk about it anymore. It's done. They're going to be like, okay, yeah, I read the book. And they're going to try to talk to them, be like, no, I read it. It's fine. I know. Don't be mad. Don't hit people when I'm mad. You know what I mean? Like the book said it. We don't need to talk. And they'll do that. They'll shut down. But if it's a little softer in how it's delivered, it might be like they can ask more open-ended questions. That's stealing the thunder. The counselor they have a whole like master's degree, so they can use this as a tool, but they still have to use the tool. You know what I mean? You don't want to give them the birdhouse already built. You give them the wood and you give them the hammer, and then they work together. And that's, I think, the difference.
Yeah, we just want to open this discussion.
Right.
It's a
But it needs to
discussion
be
opener.
enjoyable or they're not going to want to engage with the discussion.
Yeah, and that's why I like what you said. Why?
Mhm.
I was looking at the adult part.
What's a book that a child would enjoy that could be useful for the adult or the child to kind of come to their conclusions about? this topic. Because Grumpy Monkey, like, I think it's brilliant that his friend was grumpy too.
Yes.
Because by the time like Jim gets to that point and Norman's like, I'm good. Are you grumpy? And he's like, yeah, I'll probably feel better soon. It makes it feel more nonchalant. Like there's just two bros sitting on a branch watching the sunset, you know? It doesn't feel like a big deal. They're just hanging out. And I think that's why also it feels nice is it's not like, okay, in conclusion, you know, like when you're in junior high learning to write lessons, and then you have to do your main points, and then don't do all that. I think summing up the lesson at the end is the picture book form of in conclusion. And we don't want to do
The other
that.
thing that's fun with Grumpy Monkey is just everybody wanted to help, even though their suggestions weren't necessarily what he would accepted at the moment. They still stayed engaged, and so there's kind of a lesson about community there,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was sweet. You know, and it just, you know, that might be when, you know, part of why it's popular. It just kind of has that feel good of like, yeah, he's, you know, he's not being bullied. He's not being, you know, everybody's not ignoring him because he's angry. He's, you know, they're trying to figure it out with him.
Mm-hmm. I like that too.
Mhm. That's one of the neat things about when your book can have layers to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that each time you come back and read, whatever mood you're in at that point, you pick up that layer. You pick up a new layer.
But if you're heavy-handed with it, they're not going to go back looking for layers because you've already said what the outside layer is.
Well, they won't even see that there isn't. You can't be heavy-handed and have all these layers.
They're like, oh, that's a rock. And it's like, no, it's an onion. It's like, you told me it's a rock. It's a rock. It's like, there's all these layers. It's an onion. It's like, nope. They're not interested in digging in.
It looks like the what is it? The trend right now is a lot of humor. You know, it does change from the books that I just had. Those are back in the day, right? So how do you find that humor? Like,
It doesn't
I
have
know
to have
there's some
humor.
some, I guess I saw in highlights, learn how to add humor to your story. Maybe
When
that's
you
what
talked about your giraffe, I thought about the giraffe being a perfectionist, and he's like, oh, I'm so tall and thin, and you know, I'm so like angular, and I have these perfect spots, and he doesn't realize there's one spot on his back that's not perfect because he can't see it.
And that would be funny.
That would be
That's actually
funny.
funny.
And he would freak out and have a panic attack over this wiggly spot on his back. And he goes through the water. He's like, look, it's perfect. But it's the reflection of the water making it look like a circle.
Mhm.
It's funny, I think, for the readers though, because they know something the giraffe does not.
And the illustrations could show, oh,
Uh-huh.
every one of my spots is perfect. And there's this one real funky one on the back. And they're like, everyone, I promise everyone's perfect. No, there's one that's right there that's not perfect. Knowing something they don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you need everybody else pointing it out, because the reader is going to see one that is very clearly not in sync with everything else, and they're all like, look, see, look, I'm telling you, he's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
when
and
he
that is-
figures out, he
that's-
panics.
That's a way of presenting humor. I mean, there's so many ways to get something funny, and something just as gentle as that, as innocent as that, is funny.
Yeah.
Doesn't always have to be a fart joke, but
It
those are
does-
nice too.
Yeah, gross humorous. There's a place for it. And it doesn't have to be funny. Like it can be a heartwarming story. Because like, there's
Giraffes can't dances.
yeah. But there's also best-selling books that are like, if animals kissed goodnight. Not really funny, it's nice. So, I mean, I would start like thinking through the children's books that you really like or that you've read, and then identify the appealing points of the different books, because it's not just humor.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's the rhyme. Sometimes it's unexpected. Sometimes it's knowing something the character doesn't know. Sometimes it's whimsical, or like Dr. Seuss was not necessarily funny, but the rhymes were good, and then the words, he made up words, and the illustrations were weird. So I guess that would fall more into whimsy.
That's good.
And sometimes the kid is going through something, and You can't make a story, I think, about grief funny. There's some stories that shouldn't be funny,
Mhm.
and that's okay. You don't have to, I wouldn't force it, but the perfectionism one could be hilarious,
Yeah,
especially if he's very, very like arrogant about what's happening, is proven wrong, and he's gone from being very prim and proper to just haywire. That juxtaposition would be, I think, just great. And maybe he's looking down on all the other animals.
yeah.
Like,
Oh,
oh, you know, the alligators, they have teeth that go up and down. Mine are just, you know, everything is just very even, and they're you know, this and that. And then you could just even have finally a character point out the spot later on and be like, I like that spot. It looks like a potato or something. I don't know. And it's probably not even a character being mean. It could be a little like child character, you know, like a little baby animal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to do it. Marcella, do you what age category do you write for?
I know I've done some working on some picture books as well as middle grade.
In your picture books, are you do you have any stories like that have a lesson you're balancing out, or you're wanting to incorporate one?
Um, I think I end up sometimes really wanting to avoid the lesson enough that I start to struggle with giving my character conflict, or even when they do, and there's one I was working on where she's solving a problem, but in the end, it was one of those. You know, this is going back a little bit. There's a book called Imogene's Antlers,
Mm.
you know, and at the, you know, so she just kind of rolls with the punches, and she kind of, you know, they figure out different ways to deal with the fact that she has antlers on her head. And at the end, when they go away, a new problem crops up.
Right.
And that sense of humor is kind of what I enjoy. So it's yeah, so it's more like the one I have now, it's like making the ending so it's satisfying to people so that they feel like there is an ending, but basically it's not like the question you thought that was going to be answered at the beginning is what's answered. So
I mean, if you don't want to do lesson, maybe you can think of it as what kind of tools does your character learn to use or learn about or incorporate in the story? I mean, it could be,
I guess that was, so the question for me on that one actually is an arc to that, because basically her skills are that she just kind of likes to solve problems. And so she works on this problem, tries some different ways. And then at the end, she gets pretty close to the answer. So she, you know, but then by a slip of chance, it doesn't quite go the way she expects it. But she's on her, you know, it's like, but I'm not sure she's learned a lot of skills. And so that's probably part of what I'm working on there, is where's the character arc for her.
Well, I liked it how you said before, the conflict, like you have trouble like finding the conflict in it. And really conflict is pretty much what we all read for. That we want to see the conflict and how they got through it.
Mhm.
I mean, it could just be how those problems happen. You could make the problems really funny, and then maybe she gets frustrated, and then she keeps going. I mean, I think that would be something that it could be how the problems happen, or like they could be ridiculous problems or cause other problems, and like
Right.
it could be funny in that way. And then her like pushing through and not giving up.
Mhm. So I just found, I came back to this old quote I wrote down here. I don't know if
Mhm.
this is, yeah, but it's readers love to see how a character will change or fail to change in pursuit of their goals despite the conflict.
Mhm.
So that's always the advice. I think the goal you're going for is giving them what they love, which is they want to watch and see how this character navigates reaches their goal or does not reach their goal. Because sometimes you're not going to reach your goal, despite the conflict. And that's the key word, despite the conflict.
Why are you afraid of having the lessons in there? Is it because of fear of it being heavy-handed?
Oh, that's kind of a generalized statement. Yeah, in terms of, um, I
not fear, but like the
Right, just kind of resistance.
resistance. That's a better word.
It's because like when and said the quote there, see, I'm the one that would grab onto, ooh, how can you make a character that just goes through all this stuff and they're just the same at the end, you know? See, like it's a certain kind of contrariness that
Yeah.
just appeals,
But there are characters that actually do remain exactly the same. There are static characters. And in that case, you're simply watching them go for a goal and overcome obstacles, but they don't necessarily change. They simply overcame
Power through it.
But there's a lot of static characters.
Then the appeal becomes something about how the story is presented. So then what is the,
Mhm.
you know, where does the draw, what is the draw for the child?
So you might want to go ahead and start Googling static picture book characters and see what other books you might be reading to lean on as permission to be you
Mm-hmm.
and to write in the way that you feel like you need to write. What are you working on, Blair?
I started with, so my brother came to me with an idea of he wanted children's books about the activities that he wants to do with his son one day because he had his first little boy. So my brother is a, you know, hunter, fisherman, and he's tired of all the little books about like Pookie, you know, that he wants to read to his son about what they're going to do together one day. So the first one I wrote was the fishing one. And I like had the professional author manuscript review at the conference here in Austin. And I just learned so many things about, like, I was having the parent teach the lesson. And I only had like one major conflict. So then I got to where I just kind of got I don't know, maybe paralyzed on it or stumped because I'm like, well, now I need a new plot line and I don't know what it's going to be. And, you know, we want it to be that, I think what I'm kind of leaning towards is sort of like the kid is he's really excited about going on his first fishing trip. So he wants it to go perfect. He's practiced, he's planned. And what we want it to be is that, like, you don't have to catch a whole bunch of fish to have a great day, you know, you can enjoy the outdoors. So trying to figure out how to get to that. And, you know, and also it being about the time that the boy and the dad spend together. So I just don't, I was home a weekend or two ago. My brother and my sister-in-law were like, why did you stop? What's going on? You know, and they're like, I think you're overthinking it a little bit too much, but also, yeah. So it really helped me that, I think Marcella was the one who said, somebody said, the one book doesn't have to solve all the problems in the world, right? It could be about one day or one thing.
Oh yeah, that was in the comments actually.
Yeah.
And hey, here's one thing. So what I get you saying is that the boy has a goal, and his goal is to catch all of the fish. And he's not going to reach his goal, but he's still going to find value in that day.
Yep.
Why is he wanting to catch all the fish? Is it so he has a good fishing story? Is it so they have lots of fish to eat? Like, why?
So he makes his daddy proud.
I think it's because he wants to be like dad, because dad is always going fishing and takes pictures of all the fish that he catches, and he wants to be like dad. And this is the first time he's getting to go. So he wants to be successful, like how dad is usually successful fishing.
Because you could make it more about him having a story to tell, like he sees his dad telling the fishing story to his uncle, or telling him the fishing story, and he wants a good fishing story. But all of these things go wrong one after the other. And maybe he, at the end, everything going wrong was the story.
Yeah.
And maybe other people are like, that reminds me when I was blah, 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 blah. You know, so I mean, there's different ways you can, because like, but why does he want to be like that? I would dig into the why of it, because it would explain the depth of his disappointment and why he's disappointed. What was he wanting that he didn't get?
Yep.
Because it might be the different family members have like a conversation about fishing and he wants to finally have a story.
Yeah.
Because it'd be funny if he caught something other than a fish. Maybe he catches a giant alligator snapping turtle.
Mhm.
And now we're bringing humor into it.
Yeah.
When you work out a version for a 90-year-old, oh wait, maybe, then let me know. It's my dad never read that book about how not catching fish is okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be a good
So I'm
title
thinking for a
book,
kid, I'm
Not
not
to
sure
Catch
if-
a Fish,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That's a good title, because you're like,
I
okay,
caught
now we gotta
everything
find
but a
out.
fish.
Mhm.
An old boot, an alligator snapping turtle.
Yeah,
His dad's hook got caught on his. So
Yeah,
they're
now the
going
story's
against
sounding-
each other.
I like the story now. Let's go. Why aren't you writing it, Blair?
Uh,
Everything but a fish.
yeah.
Everything, yeah, but how not to catch a fish? That just sounds like a good title. Sharon, did you want to share anything? All right, I think she's muted for a reason, so let me see. I'm still scrolling through the comments looking for that piece you said had inspired you. And I think I keep skipping it. I'm positive I'd seen it written down. Yeah, I think I may have remembered wrong. I'm so sorry. I feel like I definitely saw it written down. Okay, well, do we want to wrap up? Do we have anything more that we wanted to put out there?
So I know I think Maria's still here. She's been to a few.
Mhm.
The book I was thinking
Marcella as well.
yes. I
Mhm.
was thinking about doing I Want My Hat Back for the next. It's very short
Ah.
on words.
I found it. Sorry. So Blair, you're the one who said what? Blair, you're the one who said it. Somebody said it verbally and you were reiterating. Okay. You
Yep.
said that's a great point. This specific book is only about one piece of their entire life. That's what I had gotten. I was getting you reiterating. So I was wasting everybody's time. I'm now stopping. Continue on, Michelle. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No, it's okay. So I've been trying to do different kinds of studies. Like we started with the Gruffalo, which rhymed, and then we went to Unicorns Are the Worst. Now we're doing Grumpy Monkey. But this is a book people had asked for, something that taught a lesson without preaching, that was best selling.
Mhm.
Do y'all have anything like ideas that you'd like to see for the next study, or like a topic that y'all are interested in discussing next time?
I have one based off of everybody's experience, but let's hear what Maria's got to say.
A good beginnings of stories, how to begin one, that catches your attention.
Mm.
Great beginnings.
Like so I feel like something that catches the attention is going to be more on the illustrative side and the cover design.
Yeah, every picture book I pick up, it's because of those illustrations.
Mm.
Yeah. I think one thing that was a nice theme that we had going on here, therefore I think it might help with future writing, is
Mhm.
layers. Books that
Okay.
are able to incorporate so many layers, but you don't even realize it on the first read, that you just you were learning all these things that the story wasn't really about.
So a subtle layer,
Mhm.
subtle layers or something. Okay.
Mhm.
I can dig into that and try to find a book that does that.
Have you done humor yet? Just like
Mm-mm.
types of humor, or how to
Mm.
incorporate humor?
I can do humor
That
as
would be
well.
good. Humor.
I always go back to knowing something that the character doesn't know
Mm.
is such like peak like little kid humor. Like, and so I don't know. So finding ways to do that in the story are like I said, like if there's a giraffe and he's like, all my spots are perfect, but there's one squiggly one on his back. Like that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's He's just reiterating how perfect his spots are. Or maybe they're all perfect squiggles, but one is round. Just something like that. But
Or
yeah,
something
I
one
can
with- one with
humor.
a color or something.
Humor or layers. I can.
So back to the layers thing, although the humor one is definitely a very good topic for us to cover, but I want to do a quick plug for Varsha Bajaj. Her book, How Many Kisses Do You Want Tonight? So this one is a counting book, right? So you've got all your counting going on, but it's layered too. And at first it took like, I'm sorry, guys, I'm not very astute. Like things go right over my head. But here I am. I was reading it, and one day I realized, oh, wait a minute. Okay, it's a counting book, but it's also teaching me about each of the animals. So here she says, how many kisses do you want, busy one? Mommy spider asked her little spider son. I want 8, he says with a giggle, 1 on each leg. I'll try not to wiggle. So right there, I learned that, I mean, as a kid, I learned that spiders have 8 legs. And I learned the number 8.
Mhm.
So yeah, layers are, yeah, but there's so many different ways to do it. This is just one author's way of putting in layers. So I'm gonna put this back and then, do you want?
Okay, cool. Well, y'all will see which book I end up choosing among those two topics. I'll do one and then the other. So if
Mhm.
within the next 2 months, I'll have those kind of booked out. It'll probably just depend. The layer one might take. I'll do humor next month because I think that'll be a little easier to prepare. And then the layered one, I might want to bring in a couple of examples of books, since that's a deeper topic.
I was almost feeling with humor also that would be a great thing for multiple books. So you can see
Mhm.
different ways of.
Yes.
And the reason I had mentioned about the characters, because I went to, there in Austin, the training. One of them was, the first line should be, of course, your character. You describe, I know that you have pictures, but you should begin with who your character is. And then another line was, what brings in the reader? What brings in the reader? So it was kind of like, this is going to happen, you know, so it makes the child want to read it.
Mhm.
The drawing you in, like you said, what
Mhm.
appeals, that first line, those first few pages makes the child, that's what I mean, like learning that.
I think the
Because you
cover
can-
initially
You can't say
brings
that
them
once
in.
upon a time, you know, but
Mhm.
they did say that your story should be catchy at the beginning.
But yeah, Once Upon a Time is not bringing anybody in. Not only is it old and redundant, but also it tells you
Yeah.
nothing about the story.
Or one
Also,
sunny day, yeah.
yeah, or
Like that.
yeah, what that's what I was gonna say, or just describing the background. Again, it's not bringing you into the story. So when they say you go right to the character, I think that's what they mean. Don't do these abstract things, but you're not saying, you don't always have to say grumpy monkey is a monkey, you know.
That makes me want to write a story that begins with once upon a time, just a nya. Maybe it's once upon a time, there was a princess, and then you turn the page and she has a big marker and she's exited out and she's like, this isn't that type of story.
Yeah,
But
you know what that reminds me? One of the best book series for middle grade, I think it was. It's some sci-fi book, but it was all started because somebody said, you can't write this. And he said, oh, watch. And he
Look.
found a way to do it.
Sarah Bareilles' famous love song is because the record company said, you to get this album, you need to write a love song. And the song's, I'm not gonna write you a love song because you asked for it because you need one, you see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's good to know the rules, but it's also sometimes fun just to break them intentionally.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up here. Thank you guys for attending. My email is up on I think on the website if y'all have anything. Maria, feel free if you want to reach out. We can chat. I'd be happy to read, your manuscript if you'd like. I open that to anybody. I think it's fun to read people's manuscripts. So.
I think it is important though, and I don't think it changes anything, but it is always important to be honest about where we stand. And I am not a published author, so I can only speak from the experience that I have learned through reading and from listening to other.
Oh yeah, for
writers.
sure.
And so like, I feel like that is just something that should be put out there.
Oh yeah, I'm not like professional, like I'm working on being published, but I'm happy to read it. And yeah, happy to look at it. But yeah, no, full transparency.
Thank you. This was very
Big word I was
helpful.
looking for.
Hmm?
So that's a
you-
big word.
Do you think, I don't know who is in this group or how many people, is it regular? I mean, it looks like I've seen myself, yeah. I don't know, and Blair, this is your first time, but you know, we can like create maybe a critique group or something, review, or
Mhm.
here's my writing that we can all share. I don't know what would be the guidelines for that, or
So on the
Just an idea.
SCBWI webpage, they have a page for critiques. And in fact, I'm going to pull this up so I can speak. And also I put Michelle's email right there in the chat box if that makes life any easier for anybody. And now let me look here. Okay, I'm going to our site and chapter critique group, learn more. From here, you can learn that we have one before the monthly meeting every time, but then, where is it? Yeah, I thought right here, and this is really embarrassing, as the RA, I should be able to just speak without even having to look stuff up, but I can't, I'm so sorry. I thought we had the page where we showed what critique groups were active. And who to contact for that. I don't see it right now, so I think we need to refresh that page. But in the meantime, Nancy Blair is in charge of our critiques. So yeah, and the point of my telling you that is if we all say, hey, Nancy, there's 4 of us, we want to start up a group, she could help organize that, but, or like, and no, I'm just putting stuff out there. I'm probably just clogging up the works. I'm sorry, I've got something here that won't go down now. I just, or we could, oh, good, thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah,
It's-
let's see here. And it is coming on my other screen. Yes,
That one's
yes,
on, I see
yes.
one online one. But I
That's
mean,
Austin's, that's Austin's.
we
Mhm.
also have groups.io if
Mhm.
we want to post there. You can also
Brilliant.
because
Yes.
I'm looking to I try to go to the monthly meeting one, and I have been, but I would like a group where I'm seeing similar people. I mean,
Mhm.
Margaret's usually there, but that makes for a really long day, like, you know, going before and then staying through the whole meeting.
Yeah,
for
and
me.
then there's the ease of meeting on Zoom. And some of us, like Sharon, if she wanted to join it, she's in Chicago. So being on Zoom would make it so that she would be able to have some, you know, interaction.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you guys wanted to get together and share emails, just raise your hand and I can make sure that I connect you all, or you can go through Nancy Blair. Does anybody else want to join Maria in this, or shall we save this for another day, this topic, or?
I'm willing to as well. I mean, I need a critique group. Another day for Blair.
Okay.
That'd be interesting.
Blair, I do hope you start like writing your story again. I think it's very cute, and I've never heard of a fishing book personally, so I like it, and I'm glad you came, and I hope it's helpful for you being here because
Yes, it was
You've got
definitely helpful.
you've got it.
Thank
and
you.
can I just say something, Blair? I've written my story so many times and been critiqued and told and do this, do that. We're learning. So I mean, don't feel you can't be in it because it's like, oh, I'm not, because I'm not there either. But you know, we learn from each other. And
Yeah.
um
Yeah, critique groups aren't because you already know everything.
Mm-mm.
Otherwise, why would you be in one? It's about hearing, having ears that aren't your own, hear something to say, you know what, if I were in a bookstore, how would I feel about that?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just having another human read it out loud and seeing where they trip over the words.
Yeah.
That's a big one because friends and family may not be completely honest, or they may be like, I love you, so I love this. But they'll be honest if they read out loud. You can just mark where they tripped,
Mhm.
and they don't. That's good feedback, even they
Yeah.
don't have to be honest.
Oh, and I'm so sorry. I should have already stopped the recording. So everybody in recording land, I'm so sorry for having not. Maybe I'll go back and edit it. Maybe I won't. So I'm going to stop it right now. And